This is the lecture for European history for Monday. Today's date is early in May, second week. What is it? May 10th, 2021. And we just saw a video version of Sabaton's The Rise of Evil, which took video from a TV miniseries of the same name, Hitler, The Rise of Evil, which does a pretty good job of showing Hitler's biography from being a bum in Vienna living in homeless shelters to becoming the leader and chancellor of the German Empire. There are a few, first of all, of those scenes, I think the most powerful in the video is of Hitler speaking to the Reichstag, which is meeting in an opera hall because the Reichstag building had burned down. And you've got Nazis filling half the hall on the floor, and you've got non-Nazis in the other half. And Hitler is speaking, and the non-Nazis are reacting against it, but chaotically, like civilians. And some of them are being pulled down by Nazis nearby, others are being pulled down by each other. And then to take control of the chaos, Goering, who's the big fat guy in back, starts singing, I think, the German national anthem with the Nazi salute. And soon, the disorganized resistance looks over and sees these paramilitary, disciplined Nazi Reichstag representatives, and most of them can think of nothing to do but join in with the song. The power of us to stampede one another, the power of us to rule one another with words. You don't need superpowers, you simply need the capacity to convey belief and hope at a time of hopelessness, to convey conviction in a time of confusion, and to have a disciplined plan rather than chaos and anarchy. There were a couple of words I neglected to teach you last week when we covered the Mein Kampf, the book of Hitler, My Struggle. One of them was Lebensraum. Lebensraum, Lebensraum. You will need to know it. Lebensraum, N is in November. Lebensraum. Lebensraum literally means living space. Hitler promises in Mein Kampf that the German people will have expansion. So they will have living space. They will take the areas east of Germany, Poland, the Baltic states, White Russia, the Ukraine, and Russia west of the Urals, north of the Black Sea, south and east of the Baltic and White Seas. Those areas will be turned into German farmland and resource territory. And the local population of Slavs will either be turned into a permanent slave underclass, which works and does not learn. The children and the grandchildren are educated simply to pull the plow like an ox, or do simple tasks as household slaves. And if they're content in this, great. If they're not, they'll be worked to death, and the area will be then populated by German family farmers. The goal of this is the same goal, by the way, it's an economical goal, that the Italians and the Japanese also have for their empire. The goal is autarky, A-U-T-A-R-K-Y, which is an economic term I've mentioned to you before, but I'm going to mention it again. Autarky, A-U-T-A-R-K-Y. And what autarky is thorough economic self-sufficiency. Thorough, that means total, economic self-sufficiency. With autarky, a nation need not worry about foreign trade because they have everything they need to survive and prosper under their own territory, rule in their own territory. You won't have to worry about the British fleet strangling you with a blockade. You won't have to worry about international trade or dealing with people who want to boycott you or have levy sanctions against you. You can control everything your economy needs. You are self-sufficient, and since you are supreme within your own domain, you have no need to worry about anything outside of it. It stabilizes your rule. This is the goal of all totalitarian societies, to be utterly self-sufficient. That is autarky. You have your hand up? Okay. Just didn't want to ignore you. So that is what Hitler and Mussolini and ultimately the Japanese are going to go for, to control an empire that gives them economic self-sufficiency. Let's look at the steps in Germany that lead to war. We start out with item 4, Germany rearmed. German rearmament is in violation of the Versailles Treaty. Germany is supposed to have an army of 100,000 men with no tanks, no air force, no heavy warships, no submarines, no air force, if I didn't mention that already. However, Europe's a dangerous place in a dangerous world. Communist Russia is just a few hundred miles to the east, beyond Poland. And nobody is safe in Europe who is weak. The Germans keenly understand this. So their 100,000-man army is going to be used as a training institution to get as many young men into the army and trained and out of the army, and so that other men can come in. So the army itself won't be over 100,000 men at this time, but the goal is not to keep the same 100,000 men for a long period of time. It's to get 100,000 trained, then get another 100,000 trained, and so on and so forth. The Germans did the same thing during the Napoleonic Wars. They were forbidden to have large armies, but both Prussia and Austria used the small armies they had as training institutions, and they built up an unofficial secret, don't tell Napoleon, reserve. The Germans basically do the same thing here in order to have a military, because it's a lot easier to retrain somebody you've already trained a few years later than it is to train a completely raw recruit who happens to be in his mid-20s. It's a lot easier. So the 100,000-man army is being abused in terms of the intent of the Allies. But that's not all. Weimar, and this is Weimar Germany, this is not Hitler. This is the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s. If you make a pariah of more than one person, if you shun more than one person in your social circle or in politics or in international relations, the pariahs will tend to come together against you because you've given them something in common. You've made them outcasts and you've made them hate you. Germany and Russia come together. It's not that the Weimar Germans love or trust the communists. They don't. They fear them, and there's a good reason to fear them. But the communists, like the Germans, are being treated like outcasts, like pariahs, by the Western victors. It's not that the communists think any better of the Weimar Germans. They're a bunch of milquetoast soft bourgeoisie. But what it is they have common enemies. So German soldiers and reservists filter discreetly from Germany deep into the USSR. They go to camps deep within the USSR where the German military trains with the Russians. They bring advanced blueprints for new kinds of tanks, planes, and guns, new military theories that they share with their Russian allies. And they're going to be allowed to train with these tanks and guns that the Soviets build. The Germans are going to strengthen their military in alliance with the Soviets with the Germans. They're going to pool their strength and make their military stronger by doing so. So both Germany and the Soviet Union are helping each other to grow strong, even though eventually they're going to fight each other. That's later. This is obviously in violation of the treaty. Now, there's no air force allowed in Germany, no Zeppelins, no warplanes. However, all of a sudden, wealthy people throughout Germany sponsor glider societies. Glider societies for aviation enthusiasts allow people to learn to fly, but it's not powered aircraft. Now, I've never flown as a pilot. I'm not a pilot. What I understand is this. It's really difficult to learn how to fly a powered craft. You've got to learn to take off, get enough air over the airfoils to generate lift. You've got to learn to maneuver in flight without stalling your aircraft or sliding down, or in any other way causing yourself to die, or the people on board to die. Then you've got to learn to land, which is also very, very difficult. But in a powered craft, most problems can be solved by acceleration. You're slowing down, the airfoils aren't as efficient, you're beginning to fall. So you go, and your engines surge, and you get more airflow, and you can fly your way out of most problems. But with a glider, you have to learn how to be subtle. In a glider, you have to learn how to fly the thermals like an eagle does, the updrafts of warm air. You have to learn how to maneuver in such a way that you can remain airborne at speed without falling. And it's all about maneuvering the aircraft. In other words, you're learning a deft touch that most people never learn. These glider pilots who are trained in the 15 years before Germany comes out in the open with their Air Force are going to form the basis of a Luftwaffe force, of an Air Force that is going to dominate the skies over Europe for the first few years of World War II. These guys learn really, really subtle flying techniques in their glider societies. Finally, Hitler does take power. And after being in power for just about 2 years, Hitler is ready to tell the world what is really happening. From the time he took power, he began ordering the construction of tanks, submarines, and warplanes secretly. They were going to be designed, they were going to be set in stone, and then different marks of different types of planes and tanks and guns were being built secretly. Now, before Hitler, the German government, the Weimar government, is already in violation of Versailles where Navy armament is concerned. They're not allowed to have battleships, which are big, heavy ships with big, heavy guns and lots of heavy armor. They are allowed to have a few cruisers. But what they're going to do is build what's called a pocket battleship. It's a battleship that'll fit in your pocket. It's a cruiser-sized vessel with cruiser-sized armor that's faster than any battleship, but instead of having cruiser armament, which is 6-inch or 8-inch guns, bullets with bullets that are 6 to 8 inches in diameter, they have battleship-type guns, 11-inch guns. A few of them. The theory of the pocket battleship is its long-range diesel engines are going to allow it to go deep into the ocean and destroy British or French or any enemy's commerce. Thus, a German blockade caused by sinking of ships, the way the submarines would do, except with a pocket battleship. They were designed to be able to outfight anything that they couldn't outrun. They could outrun most battleships, which they couldn't fight. They couldn't outrun most cruisers, medium-sized ships, but they could outfight them. So the pocket battleship, which is a product of the Weimar Republic, not Hitler's Navy, is already a violation of the Treaty of Versailles in spirit. But in 1935, Hitler comes out in the open. He shows off his new fighter planes. He shows off his new submarines, his new tanks. He parades them in front of the news media of the world, newsreels and so forth, reporters. How does the world react? People have known for years that the Germans are secretly flouting, but this is an open flouting of the Versailles disarmament clauses. He's shredding the treaty. And what does the world do? Absolutely nothing. In fact, the British go one further. Instead of doing absolutely nothing, they send representatives to Germany asking for a new Navy treaty. And they signed the 1935 Anglo-German Naval Agreement, which is going to legitimize the illegal German Navy. As long as they don't try to outbuild the British are fine. So instead of stopping Hitler, which the anti-Nazi Germans were counting on, oh, look at this buffoon. He's openly declaring that Versailles doesn't apply anymore, that we can rearm. They're going to smack him like a bug, but they don't. They let him get away with it. The British partner with him and legitimize. Now, to show you what kind of a guy Hitler is, the moment the Anglo-German Naval Agreement is signed, Hitler orders his navy to follow Plan Z, which is a plan to construct a navy fit to destroy the Royal Navy within the next 8 years. So there's no goodwill. None at all. Hitler sees the Anglo-German Naval Agreement as a sign of weakness, which it is, and institutes immediately a plan so that if war doesn't start by 1944, the Germans will have a navy that should be able to crush the Royal Navy. That's the plan. They're in the open about all of this. Why do the Western Allies do nothing? They want to avoid war. They don't want war. We're going to see where that desire to avoid war gets them. You see, the problem with this world are not peace-loving people that want to avoid war. If that was the problem, you can negotiate with them. But you can't negotiate with somebody who's a bully. Bullies are cowards, but they have one skill. It's not violence, by the way. It's intimidation. Bullies have the skill of making you feel afraid, of inducing fear in their victims. Now, that means that the prime thing you're fighting when you deal with a bully is your own fear, which they are evoking like a demon within you. What do? Well, if you let your fear master you, you give the bully what he wants. You reward him. You pay him for victimizing you. The problems of this world are not peaceful rulers that want to work out their differences peacefully. If that were the case, the League of Nations and the United Nations would work. The problem is most nations are led by its most aggressive bullies. That's how they get into power, because it's not democracy around the world then or now. How do you face a bully? You hurt him bad enough to show that you're not weak. The Romans have a phrase, if you want peace, prepare for war. Do any of you have the ability to translate that into modern speak, to explain it? If you want peace, prepare for war. Ms. Morosco, do you have your hand up? Okay. Somebody should be able to explain it in here. I'd rather not pick somebody randomly, but I will if necessary. If you want peace, prepare for war.
Thanks.
No, you.
Okay. So if you want no conflict, you're gonna have to fight for it and fight to maintain it.
Well, you may not even need to fight if you're big and scary enough. If you have an army that's strong, nobody's going to mess with you unless they're ready for a war. If you're weak, they'll mess with you all the time. See, the reason I say with confidence all bullies are cowards is because bullies don't attack people their own size, nor do they attack people that seem stronger than them. Bullies always opportunistically attack prey, beings, people, circumstances that they see they have its strength, they have the advantage. They attack weaker people. That is the sign of a bully and of a coward. If you hurt a bully, no matter how big a guy is, he's got knees. And if you understand human anatomy, you understand what I'm saying. The biggest and strongest person, if you hit their knee with the right amount of force at the right angle, you'll lame them. You might even cripple them. Now, if you try to do that and fail, they're going to rip your arms off because they'll go wild because you just tried to permanently end their ability to walk normally. So don't go for somebody's knees unless you're ready to go totally all out. But if you do, you can prevent the bully from being as plausible a threat in the future because he'll have a limp. What you can definitely show is that every time the bully wants something from you, you can make him pay for it by hurting him. You may lose, but you'll hurt him. Being an opportunistic, a predator, and a coward, sooner or later the bully will pick another easier target than you. If you want peace, prepare for war means when you're dealing with a bad person with bad intentions, which, by the way, is most of the world's leaders, they're not saints, they're not college professors, they're not nice people, and they're not diplomats. They're the aggressive people that took their power by force. When you're dealing with people like that, if you seem stronger than them, they'll stay the hell away from you. If you don't, they'll come after you. Weakness invites attack. Unfortunately, that's the world. And Hitler knows it. So do the Japanese. So do the Italians. They push, and they get what they want from a weakened West that has no backbone, no willingness to fight. We'll see where this goes. 1936. Okay, let's explain this map. The big brown line or black line around the edge is the edge of the German Empire before World War I. Now, this border has some orange areas in it. That's because when they lose World War I, Germany loses parts of East Prussia. They lose all of West Prussia. They lose Danzig to become an international city. They lose part of Upper Silesia. They lose Alsace-Lorraine. They lose the Tsar, which we'll talk about, S-A-A-R, Tsar. It's pronounced the same way as the Russian Emperor, totally different spelling and meaning. They lose Eupen and Malmedy to the Belgians, and they lose parts of Schleswig to the Danes. Okay, so all of this orange area has been carved out of Germany, but that's not all. Let's talk about the Tsar. The Tsar Land is a city-state-sized region near Luxembourg that is coal-rich. And the Tsar Land is taken out of Germany at French demands. The French make it a neutral area for a dozen years. And what the Tsar Land is going to do is they're going to be politicked by the French, seduced into voting at the end of the time to join France or Germany in a plebiscite. The people of the Tsar will get to vote in a plebiscite, a national vote, and if the nation votes to join France, it will become part of France, and if not, it will become part of Germany. This area here of horizontal lines, that's the Rhineland, plus a little. It's the area Napoleon took from the Germans in his time, and it's the area that the Versailles Treaty disarms. No arms, no military forces, no military bases are allowed within the Rhineland. Now, at first, the Rhineland is governed by Allied powers, including Britain, the United States, and France. Soon, German civil government returns. However, in the early 20s, when the German government can't pay its war debt, the French occupy the Rhineland, which includes, by the way, the Ruhr. The Ruhr is the industrial heartland of Europe. That's up here. So the Germans don't control their whole territory because they're only allowed lightly armed police forces west of the Rhine River, or in a few cases east of the Rhine River, so that the bridgeheads are controlled. So the Germans don't control the Rhine or the Tsar when Hitler takes power, when he is given power. This is a problem. Luckily for Hitler, very soon into his rule, the people of the Tsar Land have their plebiscite, and they vote overwhelmingly to join Germany. So France's efforts to woo away this coal-rich German region into joining France fail, and Hitler gets a propaganda victory. Then, what to do about this Rhineland? Well, Hitler waits until a year or so after announcing his rearmament plans. He calculates that it's time to do something about the Rhineland, something bold. His generals completely disagree. So Hitler tells them the order is going to be, on an early weekend morning, drive across the Rhine bridges and occupy the Rhineland with armored cars, with a few tanks, with troops and horsemen and guns, to remilitarize the Rhineland, to march right in. The generals say, Führer, mein Führer, my leader, the French are the largest army in Europe. We're just beginning to rearm. There's no way we can fight them. Not only do they have more equipment, their equipment is better than ours right now. Their tanks are better than ours right now. Their air force will flatten ours and knock it to the ground like a fly swatter meeting a fly. We can't fight them now. Moreover, they have more experience than we do because of their colonial wars. Hitler says, you know what? I'm so sure I'm right. This is what I'm going to do for you. He's still getting control of the army. He's got to appear reasonable. Here's what we'll do. You have your orders. On this date, you will cross the Rhine bridges and move at a moderate pace to occupy the Rhine. If the French in any way show any sign of holding against you or fighting, all units will turn immediately around and skedaddle back to Germany, where I will take the blame and I will probably lose power. Okay? And the generals say, okay, if the French fight, who we can't beat, we're going to pull back. Hitler says, fine, you're going to go in though, right? Oh, yes, mein Führer, we'll go in. The anti-Nazi Germans, both inside the army and outside the army, go, yes, the little Austrian corporal, he's not just rearming. He's openly flouting the treaty. You can't remilitarize the Rhineland. The French have already proven they're perfectly capable and willing of occupying the Rhineland. This is going to be so great. The little Austrian corporal's bitten off more than he can chew. He's going to get smacked down by our foreign neighbors, and we'll get rid of Hitler. The demon will be gone. The outsiders will help drive him out. Yes! The French pull back! They had a few forces in the Rhineland. They pull those forces away, and they don't do anything. The world does nothing. Hitler is a big hero, and the anti-Nazi Germans, like Old Testament prophets, rip their hair and shred their garments in anguish before God himself. Why? Why are they doing nothing? All they have to do is move on. Why? Well, here's why. They don't want war. The French, in the late 1920s, decide they're never going to go through another World War I. So instead of investing in new training tactics or new techniques, new planes, tanks, or guns, new rifles even, the French invest all their military money in a series of underground fortifications from here on the Belgian frontier to here on the Swiss frontier. It's called the Maginot Line. Now, the Maginot Line has an underground railroad that, unlike Harriet Tubman's, is literal. It's an underground railroad. It has gas filters and air conditioning. So if you poison gas a Maginot fortification, you're not going to do anything because its filtration system will filter out the gas. The Maginot fortifications have powered pop turrets. Is that a hill? No, there's guns under that there hill. It's got machine guns all over the place in steel and cement pillboxes. Anyone who marches an army into the Maginot Line is going to be destroyed without many casualties to the French. This is the French's answer to a new German threat. You can't move the Maginot Line east. The French don't want to go beyond it. They don't want to fight a war that they're not prepared for. Even though they're bigger and stronger, it's still a war. And they don't want a war. Oh God, they don't want a war. And they're afraid the British won't back their play. So the French do nothing because their whole defense strategy is to hide inside a fortified underground set of emplacements. A static defense strategy. They do nothing. But that's not all. No. There's an Austrian Nazi party. And that Austrian Nazi party are friendly to Hitler because, after all, Hitler's an Austrian. Oh, they like his National Socialism. Around the time of rearmament in 1935, the Austrian Nazis assassinate the Austrian Prime Minister, a guy named Dollfuss. And they begin trying to take power in a coup, or a putsch. The Austrians ask for help in Italy. Benito Mussolini comes to the rescue, and he says to the world, "I am a friend of Austria, and anyone who attacks the Austrians is going to have to face the reality that the Italian army is going to march across the Brenner Pass and help defend Austria against anyone, even the Germans." Mussolini at this time has an army like the French army that far outclasses the newly rearming German army. So the Austrian Nazis go to ground. They hide for the next couple of years. The threat is over. Mussolini is the hero who has saved Europe from war. He's about to go into Ethiopia, but that's a different story. He saves Europe from war in 1935 and protects Austrian independence. Well, now it's 1938, 2 years after the Rhineland's been militarized. German army is much stronger. Early in 1938, noises are being made, a lot like the noises made by the Communist Party of China today. Do you realize that the Communist Party of China claims ownership over all members of the Chinese diaspora? That means if you're of Chinese heritage in the United States, in Germany, in Indonesia, anywhere in the world, you really are under the authority and are owned by and are protected by the People's Republic of China. You're theirs and they're yours. That's why today the PRC has spies in the United States and Germany and Indonesia in most Chinese cultural communities around the country, because they want to know who's saying what. Because Chinese, wherever they are, people of Chinese heritage, according to Chinese communist law, are subject to the laws of the PRC, including a national security law that makes it against the law and is fit subject for punishment to speak out against the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah, that's no joke. That's for real. People have been targeted for punishment in China because they're relatives of people here who aren't behaving well and playing ball. The German government under Hitler claims ownership of and common cause with Germans everywhere in the world, whether they are in Germany or not. Well, Austria wasn't in Germany because when the unification happened, the Austrians ruled a large empire of non-Germans. German nationalists don't want that. They don't want icky non-Germans in their new Germany. But now, the Allies had a chance to fix all that with their national self-determination. They destroyed the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But those hypocrites, those mealy-mouthed hypocrites, didn't give us Austria. If they were serious, they would have given us Austria because the Austrians are Germans. They wear lederhosens. They sing at Oktoberfest. Aye, 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 swinging their beer steins. They are as German can be. If you believe in national self-determination, Austria should have already been a part of Germany. But it's not. It's not. Hitler's going to fix this. Austria will be made part of Germany. The world is afraid of war. And an idea, a compromise is arrived at diplomatically. We're going to have a plebiscite. And that plebiscite is going to be a national vote of all Austrian citizens. Do we remain independent or become part of Germany? I believe it's 3 days before the plebiscite the German tanks roll across the border. The Austrian government panics. No resistance is organized. The tanks peacefully occupy Austria. And everyone looks to Italy. Oh, at this point, if you remember The Sound of Music, Von Trapp and his family go across the border, I think into Switzerland. In Italy, everyone wonders what Mussolini's going to do because he had guaranteed Austria's security. Mussolini says, you know, since 1935, I've come to like the little German fellow. I can trust Austria in his hands. Besides, they're just Germans. They're all Germans together. Let them have Austria. So Benny the Moose undercuts the Austrians. He does so in a way that's somewhat dismissive of Hitler because Benny the Moose, Benito Mussolini, is the senior fascist leader at this time. Hitler's still making his way in the world. But Hitler thanks Mussolini and pledges to him a personal debt of honor. For this gift, I owe you, and I will never forget you, and I will never leave you in the lurch. And Hitler makes good on it late in World War II. We'll talk about that when we do World War II. But Hitler considers it a personal favor by Mussolini to let him have the Anschluss, which is what it's called. The annexation of Austria is the Anschluss. There was no plebiscite. There was no vote. Hitler marched in, and the crowds cheered, and the Jews were rounded up. So that's the Anschluss in early 1938. And then, in the summer of 1938, a new cry is heard. Stories appear in German newspapers that Sudeten German women are being raped by Czech men, that Sudeten German homes are being violated by Czech thieves, that Sudeten German homes are being burned, and that men are being riled, and that German children are not being allowed to learn German. They have to learn Czech. Now, who are these Czechs anyway? Well, the Czechs are a Slavic people that have lived in the heart of German Europe for 1,000 years or more. The Czechs have never been culturally absorbed by the Germans, and they've held their own. As part of the Holy Roman Empire, the Czechs were prominent. And remember, the 30 Years' War, which devastates Germany, starts in Prague with the defenestration there. So the Czechs are a long-established, strong, civilized people in the heart of Europe. But they're not Germans. They're Slavs. However, because this area has been so long in mixed control, Czech regions within the Holy Roman Empire, the mountain region around the edges of Bohemia and Moravia, the Czech provinces, the Sudeten Mountains, are occupied by a German majority, a slight German majority. So the Germans occupy the mountain shield that shields the Czech lands from the German lands. Since the First World War and Czech independence, the Czechs have fortified those mountains. Their fortifications make the Maginot Line look silly because the Czechs aren't fortifying low hills and plains, they're fortifying mountains. Much easier to do. The Czechs also have an arms industry second to none. They produced one of the world's best tanks in 1938, one of the world's best light machine guns in 1938. But the arms industry is also in this industrial region, the Sudetenland. Hitler's claiming the Germans of the Sudetenland are being victimized. And he will not accept anything but their return is his word, to Germany, where there will be war. And that's where we'll leave things for today, with Hitler threatening the Sudetenland. Oh, I should mention this. The Czechs have also, in addition to a strong military, a defense treaty with France and Britain, who are obliged to go to war if anyone attacks the Czechs. If there are no questions, are there? Are there?
What was the light machine gun and the tank?
The Bren light machine gun is used by the British throughout World War II and after, and it's a really good one. It's the one with the banana clip on top.
Yeah.
And the Panzer Kampfwagen 38 is what the Germans call the Czech tanks that they have built for their army. The Germans actually used Czech tanks all the way up through 1944-45 as a secondary tank to their Panzer 1, 2, 3s, their Tigers, their Panthers, and so forth. Good stuff. Thank you.